I am 80 years old, and I should be sitting here telling you about the wisdom I've gathered or the empires I've built. But I am not. I am sitting here telling you about the thing I destroyed. My life feels like a monument to what could have been. I look around this empty house, and all I see are the choices I made that pushed people away. Most of all, I see the choice I made regarding Stanley, my brother. We had a rift that began with something so small, so petty, that I truly cannot even recall the details now. That is the horror of it. I cannot remember the spark, but I live every minute with the devastating fire it caused. I wasted 2 decades of potential happiness because I could not utter 3 simple words. I am sorry. I often think about the mathematics of regret. 20 years. That is 7,300 days that I actively chose to be angry, to be distant, to be proud. Think about all the Thanksgivings, the Christmases, the birthdays, the simple Sunday dinners we missed. My children grew up barely knowing their Uncle Stanley because of my foolish, selfish stubbornness. I told myself it was principle. I told myself I was justified in my anger, that he owed me the apology first. That lie was the thick armor around my heart, and that armor eventually became my coffin. It enclosed me, cutting me off from the one person who knew me before the world defined me. It is a lonely burden to realize you sacrificed the most valuable thing you had for the sake of being right. Being right has left me here, utterly alone with my memories. The memory of Stanley is hazy sometimes, but the guilt is crystal clear. Guilt does not fade with time, it sharpens. It is a physical weight, like wet cement setting in your chest. When we were young, we were inseparable. He was only 2 years younger than me, but he always looked up to me. We shared a room, shared secrets, shared the burden of growing up in a difficult household. He was my protector in school, and I was his advisor in life. People used to call us the inseparable duo. The sheer depth of the bond we had in our youth makes the subsequent 20 years of silence seem like a cosmic joke played entirely on me. I threw away gold for pocket change, believing I could find that kind of loyalty again. I was profoundly wrong. I remember the summer of 1965. Stanley and I hitchhiked across the entire state, sleeping under the stars. We ran out of money halfway through and ended up washing dishes in a greasy diner just to eat. We laughed so hard that summer, believing the world was ours for the taking. We had that shared history, that silent communication only brothers understand. When my father passed away suddenly, Stanley was the rock, the one who held everything together, even when I was too paralyzed by grief to function. He put his own dreams on hold to help me stabilize my business when I started out. He gave me everything, and how did I repay him? With silence and years of cold indifference. The irony cuts deep, knowing the debt I owed him was far greater than any perceived injury. The fight started over a business investment, a foolish land deal in Arizona. I thought Stanley had undermined me, that he went behind my back to secure a loan I wanted. It was all about money and territory, the usual male vanity. I said terrible things, unforgivable things, questioning his loyalty and his integrity. I accused him of trying to sabotage my future. He was hurt, visibly shaken, and he tried to explain. But my pride was a roaring fire consuming all reason. I remember his last words to me that day. He said, "Harold, you are poisoning yourself with this anger. When you wake up, call me." I never made that call. I was too busy calculating who was more in the right, never realizing that being right was a complete loss for both of us. The first year was the hardest. We lived in the same city, less than 10 miles apart. We drove past each other's houses. I saw his car parked in the driveway and felt a knot in my stomach. Mildred, my wife, she was constantly urging me. She told me to swallow my pride, reminding me that life was too short for manufactured grievances. She even tried calling Beatrice, Stanley's wife, arranging neutral territory meetups. I sabotaged every attempt. I told Mildred that if Stanley wanted to fix things, he knew where I was. That coldness, that deliberate distance, was the weapon I used to defend my fragile ego. And every day that passed without reconciliation, the wall between us grew thicker and higher. It was a self-imposed prison I built brick by heavy brick. Stanley tried 3 times to reach out directly in those early years. He sent a card when I had my heart scare, simply saying, "Thinking of you." He even showed up at Gary's retirement party, knowing I would be there. I saw him across the room. He held my gaze for a moment, a look that was full of sorrow, not anger. I turned my back. I pretended I hadn't seen him. That moment, that instant where I chose petty vengeance over love, is branded into my memory. That was the moment I permanently forfeited the high ground. I realized much later that he was offering me the apology I needed to give him. He was willing to be the bigger man just to restore peace, and I rejected his mercy because I felt entitled to his defeat. My isolation did not just affect me and Stanley. It deeply wounded Mildred. She loved Stanley like a brother, and she felt the absence acutely. She watched me wither. She watched me choose resentment over happiness, and she struggled with the knowledge that she could do nothing to stop it. She often cried about the fractured family during the holidays. Our own happiness was dimmed by the dark shadow of my unresolved anger. My stubbornness was a constant poison in our marriage, a reminder that I valued my ego more than the emotional well-being of the people I supposedly cherished. If I had listened to Mildred, if I had honored her pleas for peace, everything would be different. I failed her just as profoundly as I failed Stanley. Life moved on, carrying us both further away, geographically and emotionally. Stanley and Beatrice moved down to Florida. They started a new life, built a new circle of friends. I saw pictures on Facebook sometimes, shared by a mutual acquaintance. Stanley looked happy, genuinely content. That sight didn't soften me. It hardened me. I viewed his happiness as a betrayal. Why was he thriving when I was struggling with the weight of this division? It was twisted thinking, truly poisonous narcissism. I convinced myself that time would eventually bring him to his knees, that he would eventually call and beg forgiveness, proving my righteousness. I waited for a victory that would have been meaningless even if it arrived. I waited for a phantom apology that never needed to come. What held me back was terror. The terror of vulnerability. I had spent 2 decades constructing this persona of the wronged man, the powerful man who could not be slighted. To apologize, to admit I was wrong, meant dismantling that entire shield. It meant facing the possibility that I was simply a flawed, scared old man. That fear of losing face was more terrifying to me than the thought of losing my brother forever. I realize now that Stanley wouldn't have judged me. He would have embraced me. The only person judging me was the fictional version of Stanley I had created in my mind, the one who demanded humiliation. The real Stanley only ever asked for simple, honest love. The closest I ever came to fixing it was last spring. I had booked a trip to visit Gary down in Florida, about an hour away from Stanley. Mildred had been planning it secretly with Beatrice. She presented me with the itinerary and said, "Harold, this is your chance. Just coffee, 30 minutes." My stomach dropped. The chance was terrifyingly real. I panicked. I invented a scheduling conflict with a fictional business meeting and canceled the trip entirely. I broke Mildred's heart that day. I could see the disappointment shatter her hope. I felt a fleeting sense of relief that I hadn't had to face him, immediately followed by the sickening knowledge that I was running away from the only salvation available to me. I chose fear over family, one last catastrophic time. 2 weeks after I canceled that trip, Stanley called. I saw his number flash on my old rotary phone. It had been years since he had tried, and my heart hammered against my ribs. It was probably the final offering of peace he was ever going to make. I stared at the phone, frozen. Mildred was in the kitchen, and she called out, "Pick it up, Harold. Please, just pick it up." My hand hovered over the receiver. I had 100 excuses lined up, 100 cold words prepared. But before I could move, the ringing stopped. I stood there, silent, convinced he would call back. He didn't. I didn't know then that he was calling to tell me he and Beatrice were leaving on their road trip the next morning. It was his final, silent invitation. The next morning, the call came, not from Stanley, but from Gary. His voice was tight, thin, struggling for breath. I knew immediately something was terribly wrong. Gary said there'd been an accident, a drunk driver on the highway. Stanley and Beatrice were in the car. Stanley was gone instantly. Beatrice was severely injured but stable. The shock was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. But beneath the shock, the true panic began to set in. Stanley was gone. The window was shut. The chance I had stared at just hours before, the phone call I had ignored, was the final curtain call. I remember thinking, I don't get to say it now. I never get to say it now. The world tilted, not because of grief, but because of permanent, unfixable consequence. Mildred found me hours later, still staring at the phone, tears finally starting to fall. Not for Stanley yet, but for myself, for my failure. The pain was unbearable, but it was self-inflicted pain, the kind you know you deserve. I went to the funeral a week later. I stood at the back of the church, a stranger at my own brother's farewell. I heard the eulogy, detailing his kindness, his generous spirit, his unwavering loyalty to family. Every word was a condemnation of my own actions. I felt like a ghost, an intruder. Every eye I met held pity, or perhaps silent accusation. I had lost him twice, once 20 years ago through pride, and now forever through death. The weight of that forever is crushing. I finally found Beatrice outside the church. She was leaning heavily on Gary's arm, frail and broken. I approached her, feeling every inch of my 80 years. I mumbled my condolences, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. She looked at me, her eyes tired and full of sorrow, but devoid of hatred. She reached out and touched my arm. She said, "Harold, Stanley loved you. He always carried hope. Every Christmas he would write you a card, put it in the drawer, and wait. He just wanted his brother back." That simple sentence broke me entirely. He hadn't been waiting for my apology. He was just waiting for me to show up. And I didn't. I stood there sobbing in front of Stanley's widow, unable to apologize to the person who truly needed it, Stanley himself. The 20 years of resentment vanished in an instant, replaced by a hollow void. All the anger I had nurtured, All the justifications meant absolutely nothing when faced with the finality of death. I realize now that the argument didn't matter. The money didn't matter. What mattered was the warmth of his presence, the comfort of knowing he existed in the world, sharing my memories. I realized that reconciliation isn't about clearing the slate of wrongs. It's about choosing love over bitterness before time dictates the choice for you. I was too late. I learned the lesson, but I lost the teacher. That's the cruelest irony of aging with regret. You gain clarity just when the opportunity to apply it has expired. I live every day with this weight, and I hear Stanley's voice sometimes. Just faint memories of his laugh. I imagine what he would say if I could speak to him now. I try to craft the perfect apology in my mind, the one that covers the 20 wasted years, the lost Christmases, the hurtful silences. But the apology is just for me now. A selfish act of clearing my own conscience. It does nothing for him. It doesn't bring him back. I have to accept that my final communication with my brother was hostility and abandonment. That is my permanent legacy regarding Stanley. A legacy defined not by love, but by foolish pride and silence. I would give everything I own, every penny I fought so hard to keep, just for 5 minutes with him now. What does a man do when he realizes his greatest life achievement is also his greatest failure? I built a solid career. I raised a decent family, but I shattered the bond that mattered most. You carry that shame. You carry it like a shroud. You tell yourself stories to survive, but the truth always claws its way out. The truth is that I valued my ego above all human connection, and the ultimate price was paid not in money, but in permanence. The thought that I contributed to his sadness in his final years haunts me deeply. I hope, truly hope, that somehow, wherever he is, he understood that my silence was never hatred. It was just fear dressed up as stubbornness. But hope is a weak anchor against this kind of absolute knowledge. Look at me. I am 80 years old, and I have nothing left to prove to anyone. If you are holding on to a grudge right now, big or small, stop it. Drop it immediately. That feeling of being right is toxic, and it is fleeting. It will not keep you warm when you are old. Pride is a terrible accountant, always overestimating what you gain and underestimating what you lose. If you have a person in your life you need to forgive, or someone you need to ask forgiveness from, do it today. Do not wait for the perfect moment, because the perfect moment is when they are still breathing. Tomorrow is not a guarantee. That phone call you are avoiding, that door you refuse to knock on, might close forever without warning. Do not risk ending up like me. I wake up every morning with the same question. How do I live today knowing that Stanley died without hearing me say that I loved him? The answer is, you just do. You breathe through the regret. You accept that you were given the chance for peace, and you threw it away for the sake of being right about nothing. That empty chair at my holiday table, that silence on Christmas morning, that is my eternal punishment. I pray you never have to sit in this chair telling this story. If you hear nothing else, please understand this. There is no victory in silence, only everlasting regret. Call your brother, call your sister, tell them you are sorry, tell them you love them, before your chance, like mine, is gone forever.